Thanks for watching Endgame Economics. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe. It's completely free for you, and it helps us continue making more videos like this.
Imagine moving to Seattle for the six-figure tech salary and the waterfront views. You expect a city where people hike on weekends and apologize for bumping into you. A coworker suggests grabbing coffee. You wait for the follow-up, and 4 years later, you're still waiting. This is the Seattle Freeze, a social experience defined by locals who are unfailingly polite but remain completely unavailable for actual friendship. Regional insurance surveys quantify this isolation. Roughly 40% of residents in Washington and Oregon state that making new friends is simply not important to them, nearly double the share of those who say it is. This is the joy of missing out, or JOMO, a collective decision to quiet the social roster. These social habits coincide with a high emotional toll. Census Bureau data frequently ranks Seattle as the saddest major U.S. metro area, with up to 48% of adults reporting feelings of depression. These numbers spike sharply during the winter months, when the city's mood settles into a documented seasonal low. The city's structure reinforces this solitude. 1/3 of all households in the Seattle metro area consist of people living alone, and among young adults aged 18 to 25, half report feeling lonely, despite the city's high-status allure. This raises a behavioral question. How did a highly educated, wealthy population living in a stunning geography develop a culture of such intense isolation? Seattle's loneliness functions as a systemically designed behavioral output. To understand why it persists, we have to psychoanalyze the root causes behind the freeze. The environmental baseline is a 201-day stretch of cloud cover known as the Big Dark. This seasonal lid of gray clouds biochemically starves the brain of serotonin and removes the UVB radiation needed to synthesize vitamin D, running a continuous chemistry experiment on the local population. This climate met a specific demographic catalyst in the late 1800s. Seattle was heavily rebuilt by Nordic loggers and fishermen, who brought a specific social code to the neighborhood of Ballard. Nordic culture carries a mandate called Janteloven, or Janteloven. It is an entire cultural framework organized around the principle that you are not to think you're anything special. It discourages rugged individuality and actively disapproves of making a fuss or standing out. When an introverted, anti-individualist culture marinates in a rainy port city for a century, enthusiastic friendliness starts to look suspicious. The overeager transplant who hugs strangers reads as someone who missed the cultural memo. The Seattle Freeze functions as a long-standing environmental survival strategy. It is a system where residents have quietly opted out of the emotional labor required to maintain new connections. To function within this reserve, the city invented a specific type of social lubricant. Coffee shops serve as third places, offering a warm, legal stimulant where introverts can exist near others with zero obligation to interact. In Seattle, the coffee mug acts as a social chaperone. Grunge music and its flannel uniform emerged as a similar coping mechanism. The anti-glamour, abrasive aesthetic of the 90s perfectly mirrored the city's damp weather and the Janteloven mandate against ambition. It turned the city's interior weather into a global sound. This cultural reserve met an economic shock when Amazon expanded into South Lake Union. The influx of tens of thousands of high-earning tech workers transformed sleepy warehouse districts into an expensive boomtown within a single decade. This growth created a deep psychological wound. One of the most progressive cities in America now faces a record-breaking housing crisis, where six-figure tech salaries exist directly alongside highly visible tent encampments. Underneath the current wealth lies the memory of the 1971 Boeing collapse, which almost killed the city's economy. This boom-bust brain means that even during periods of prosperity, the city remains haunted by the possibility of the next industry collapse. Recent tech layoffs and the strategic pivot toward AI have reawakened this trauma. It reminds a one-industry town that high-paying roles can be automated or eliminated, regardless of a company's financial strength. Modern Seattle operates in a state of permanent cognitive dissonance, medicating its gloom with coffee while waiting for the next economic downturn to turn out the lights. The city's most effective therapy for this gloom is an escape into nature, governed by the phrase, "the mountain is out." When Mount Rainier appears from behind the clouds, it provides a rare hit of collective awe that the gray sky usually denies. The outdoors provides a socially sanctioned arena where the Seattle freeze thaws. Hiking offers a purpose-driven, structured environment where introverts can build intimacy without the pressure of spontaneous conversation. This collective approach is visible in local institutions like REI. Founded as a shared profit co-op, it reflects the Nordic Jante law roots of the city, a business model where everyone is a member and no one is the star. This cultural obsession with the outdoors aligns with the psychiatric prescription for seasonal depression, direct exposure to daylight to synchronize the body's circadian rhythms. For a Seattleite, a hike is often a literal medical treatment. Seattle's defining quirks, the coffee religion, the flannel, and the outdoor gear, function as brilliant, stubborn survival mechanisms designed to survive the exact same sky that causes the city's pain. Even in a place defined by its big dark, people still find ways to go out and find the light for themselves.